Childhood memories, 1939 to 1945. The spring and summer of 39 saw the end of our halcyon days. The spring was warm and heralded an early summer. I had my 6th birthday party in the garden that April. One of my friends brought me a pretty tin full of chocolate finger biscuits, something I remembered all the war days during austere rationing. I went to a party at a friend's house. There was a young sailor there who gave me a sailor doll. I wonder what happened to him, for the war broke out in September of that year. My father went to London for an operation where he died. He suffered from the results of poison gas from the First World War. Butlin's holiday camp was commandeered as a training ship for the Royal Navy, renamed HMS Royal Arthur. This was a target for enemy bombs, and a very bad raid close to where we lived made us make the decision to go to Skegness, where Jo, my sister, was due to go to Skegness Grammar School in September 1940. I left my lovely village school and the local garage where we bought palm toffee and where my mother took her best aluminium saucepans to help the war effort. We went on our bicycles to look for somewhere to live in Skegness, and a terrible thunderstorm greeted us. We sheltered in a little Norman church, St Clement's Church, where we eventually joined the choir, and my sister Jo played the pumped-up organ. My sister Jo was married there. The little bungalow we found was just right for our needs. I went to the junior school, then later joined Jo at the grammar school. Early 1940, the government decided that all the children who could be sent abroad should be evacuated to Australia or Canada for the duration of the war. We had arranged to go to my mother's friend Jean in British Columbia. The ship that went before the one we were due to sail on was torpedoed, and all lives lost. All sailings after that were cancelled. Life lost some of its charm during those war years, but we came through and enjoyed our childhood in spite of its limitations. We were all in the same boat, whoever you were. The war years passed without too much incident. There was the odd air raid, and I lost 2 friends in the bombing. This touched me deeply. As I have said, we were all in it together, and we had to get on with as normal a life as possible. The maroon rockets would go off and the lifeboat would go out on a rescue mission. This happened often. Some poor soul shot down at sea, or a ship torpedoed. One raid, when my mother was shopping, happened without warning, and my mother dived onto a nearby hedge for shelter. So did a little old lady, who, when the raid was over, found her boots had gone, blown off her feet. She was unhurt. We children, waiting anxiously at home, watched as my mother came cycling home as if nothing had happened. We blacked out our windows and put tape crisscrossed on them to prevent too much shattering of glass. The call from the air raid warden was, "Put that light out," should he see a chink of light showing. Another call was, "Dig for victory," to go produce where we could to help the rationing. The merchant navy, who brought so much of our supplies through dangerous seas, should be saluted. They took a heavy toll. Another call was, "Dangerous talk costs lives," so people had to be aware. We went to school in our gas masks, the fashion of the day. Cardboard boxes with string attached containing the gas mask, to be taken everywhere we went. There were air raid shelters in the school playground where we were given Horlicks tablets during a raid, and shelters at the side of the road. We had identity cards and ration books. School proceeded as normal, with the headmaster breaking into lessons to announce the latest news. Romantic songs were sung on the radio. Vera Lynn, Anne Shelton and many others Big bands, squadronaires, the RAF band akin to Glenn Miller. Itmar was on the radio with Tommy Handley, Children's Hour with Uncle Mac, Wandering with Nomad, a nature programme where children took part. Henry Hall and his guest night, In Town Tonight, Monday night at 8 o'clock, a quiz show, lunchtime workers' playtime for those working in factories, variety acts with stars of the day, comedy acts with Tommy Trinder, Arthur Askey, Max Miller, the Crazy Gang, and many others, and of course Gracie Fields. I still think it was the golden age of broadcasting. Of course there was the serious side of it too. Then it was 1945. The war was over and we had to adjust. Many people lost husbands, fathers, brothers and sons, also sisters, daughters and wives, something they had to come to terms with, so we weren't the only family to lose a father. On VE Day, everyone gathered on the seafront. On the parade cinema steps was a crowd of sailors from HMS Royal Arthur. It was a still May evening. A lone sailor sang a Vera Lynn song, beautiful over the night air. There was not a dry eye anywhere. London and the industrial cities suffered badly from air raids. The Blitz in London, where so much of the East End and dockyards were destroyed. My aunt and uncle were bombed out twice, and another uncle who worked in the London County Council offices was trying with his colleagues to get children from London evacuated to the countryside as fast as they could. He lost his right arm in the First World War and readjusted to make a successful career in education. The operating theatre in London, where my father went for his operation in September 1939, the month war broke out, was evacuated to the suburbs to Barkingside. He died during this operation and was buried in the local churchyard. During the war, my mother arranged for the grave to be tended. Soon after, she lost contact, and after the war we went to visit his grave, only to find that the church had been bombed, the records lost, and that the location of his grave could not be found. The graves had been opened up to take victims of the Blitz. Remembering the rationing, we had dried milk, dried egg, which was okay scrambled, a few fresh eggs were allowed, butter, margarine, sugar, tea, coffee, extra sugar if you made your own jam, and meat were all hard to come by, and the allocated amounts very small. To help us deal with this, the BBC broadcast a cookery programme with Grandma Buggins, and it was from these recipes that carrot cake was made, and is to this day. My friend had a recipe for substitute chocolate fudge made from cocoa powder and dried milk. It was good for we children who had very few sweets for so long. They were rationed too. We had clothing coupons. We lived at the seaside, but were unable to enjoy the beach as it was mined and cordoned off against invasion. The hotels and boarding houses had the army billeted on them, so the town was full of servicemen. Sometime during the war, the large enemy bombers were replaced by remote-controlled guided missiles, doodlebugs, advanced technology at that time. I remember the recognisable sound as they whizzed through the air, then suddenly silence, and somewhere there would be an explosion. They were nerve-wracking. Land girls worked on the farms. They helped produce the food the nation needed. They were not all as glamorous as the ones depicted on TV. Some were, but strong for the job they had to do. Prisoners of war also worked on the farms, and some stayed after the war. My aunt had a dairy farm. We children would stay there during the summer holidays. Italian prisoners of war were allocated to her. They worked so hard and had very little food, one piece of fat bacon and bread. My aunt sent hot cocoa to keep them going, and in return they made us little baskets. They had nothing else to give. We went to the harvest field and rode on the backs of the beautiful Shire horses as they pulled the large orange harvest wagons. At times like these, the war seemed a long, long way away. At home we slept in a metal shelter erected in our bedroom, issued by the War Office. This had a strong metal top and meshed metal sides to keep us safe should a bomb hit our home. We also had one that was dug out of the ground in the garden. This turned out to be useless as it kept filling up with water. One night during a raid, lots of noise and bright lights seen even through the blackout curtains. Mother looked to see what was happening. "Don't look," she said. We couldn't help but see. A plane had been shot down, on fire, and some poor soul in flames. We didn't know if it was ours or theirs. We knew fighting was going on across the sea on the continent, but as children it was difficult for us to see or comprehend the depth of what this meant. We watched and prayed for our bombers as they flew at night and wished them a safe return. My sister Jo was 4 years older than me. She joined the GTC, a prelude to being called up in the forces if necessary. She was 14. Uncle Sid was a major in the Home Guard, and Uncle Jack produced the food for the nation as farmer. So did Auntie Iris. My two cousins, Pat and Tony, joined the Royal Navy, Pat as a Wren and Tony in the Fleet Air Arm on aircraft carriers. Both were commissioned officers and looked splendid in their uniforms. Mother took on an insurance round, travelling on her bike to the neighbouring villages, and most people did their bit on air raid duty. As for me, I just went to school, as did my sister Jo. I was too young for anything else. One incident I must add. Every day I would go home for lunch from school. On the way back one day, the sirens went, and as I rushed along, gas mask bobbing up and down on my back, I looked up to see a dogfight going on. That is, an enemy plane, and one of ours locked in combat, and this made me rush even faster. Although there were air raid shelters at the side of the road, I saw an old man going into one and felt it safer to carry on to school. I dived into the first shelter I came to in the school playground, just as my mother arrived. She had followed me so bravely through the raid, just to make sure I was safe. So ends my recollections of my war in wartime Britain, and it was not as bad as so many people had. And in a way, we got off lightly compared. We had each other, come what may, sink or swim. We were so lucky. Our children are very interested to know about this time in history, as are my grandchildren, and yes, my great-grandchildren even. Through them, the story of this time will live on, a fitting conclusion to my poor personal story, and for those who fought and gave their lives to keep us free. My husband, who died at Christmas 2014, aged 91, was in Bomber Command, navigating Lancaster bombers. My great-granddaughter, aged 3, says, Grandad Len," whenever she sees a plane. Memoirs recorded 2015, Rosemary Dorricott, born 19th of April 1933.